Hello there. Once again, welcome to our lesson, a continuation of skeletal system. Just to review what we did in our previous lesson, we were able to identify that skeletal system is made up of several parts. That we have the bones, we have the cartilage, we have muscles, and it cannot work without joints. So we looked at the cartilage. We said that cartilage is usually impregnated with matrix that is organic in nature without salts. But for bones, consist of organic matrix but with calcium salts. Some of the calcium salts that we mentioned include phosphate salts and carbonate salts. We have not looked at the muscles and the joints, but we had a lot to look at on bones. We said majority of the skeletal system is made up of bones, but we are able to divide this skeletal system into two major parts. We had the axial skeleton and the appendicular skeleton. So we have axial skeleton and appendicular skeleton. Axial skeleton, we have already gone through it. We have said it's the main skeleton that consists of the skull, the vertebral column, the ribs, and the sternum. Vertebra, ribs, and sternum. So we say that the skull is made up of plates of bones that are fused together, which forms a casing called the cranium. Vertebra consist of short bones. Those short bones are usually joined together to form a column. That column is called the vertebral column, that one. And on the vertebral column, we are able to identify several parts. We have cervical vertebra in the neck region, thoracic vertebra found in the thorax region, lumbar vertebra in the abdominal region, and sacral vertebra, the tail part of the axial skeleton. But the remaining part, appendicular skeleton, is what arises from the main skeleton, specifically from the vertebral column. We have the forelimbs, we have the hind limbs, we have this part made up of collar and scapula called the pectoral girdle, and then this part that holds the hind limbs called pelvic girdle. So our main lesson, we are going to concentrate on these four limbs. If it is one forelimb. So for forelimb consists of a long bone called the humerus. By a sketch, this bone has a head region, shaft, and condyles. The shaft region is the one that provides surface for muscle attachments. Provides site for muscle attachments. The head is the one that will form a ball and socket joint when it fits into the cavity of the scapula. We call that cavity, glenoid cavity. Then condylus is the one that forms a joint with the radius and ulna. So we are saying the humerus is the one that now forms a joint with the scapula of the pectoral girdle. And then at the posterior end, this is the anterior end and posterior end of the bone. Posterior is the same as the head region. Posterior is also called the tail region. The other bones that make the forearm are the radius and ulna. Radius and ulna, at this point, they articulate with the humerus, forming a joint. That joint is called hinge joint. We are going to look at several types of joints. Hinge joint can only move through 180 degrees Celsius. Then we have the carpals. Carpals, these are series of bones, many bones, found in the wrist of the hand. Wrist of the hand. They are important because they allow movement of the hand in several directions, so that the hand can be used in picking process and in manipulation of the tools for manipulative purpose. You can, for example, type because your hand is able to move up, down, sideways because of the carpals. And then down we have the phalanges. 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 Phalanges are also called the finger bones. Finger bones. They are the bones that makes the fingers. So we shall have some few muscles around the phalanges, and then the hand is complete. The other part is the hind limbs. Hind limbs. Hind limbs is made up of several bones. We have the femur, patella, the tibia, fibula, tarsals, and metatarsals. So again, just like the humerus, femur is one of the largest bone. In fact, the largest in the body. It's the largest bone and the longest. The longest in the body. Why is it large? Because it is the one that holds nearly the weight of the rest of the body parts. Therefore, it has to be strong. Again, it has several parts, just like humerus. It has the shaft, it has the head, and again, this region called the condylus. But there's a slight difference between femur and humerus. They look alike in shape. The difference comes in the head. The head of femur is usually large and it has a neck. You can be able to identify the neck at that point. But for humerus, it does not have a neck. But this one is large, huge in size, or larger in size than humerus. The same rules apply. The head usually forms a joint when it articulates with the pelvic girdle at that point. That point or that cavity is called acetabulum. Acetabulum. And then the shaft is the site for attachment of muscles. Attachment of muscles, specifically thigh muscles. Condyles, they form articulating surface with tibia and fibula. So we have femur, we have tibia and fibula. From the chart, we can identify the tibia and fibula. Tibia is found in the ventral side of the body, ventrally positioned. When you say ventrally positioned, if, for example, you are looking at me and you are examining my hind limb and the lower part here, the bone that you will be able to see in front of my limb is the tibia. But we have the fibula just dorsally placed. Dorsally means at the back of the tibia. But tibia is usually large in size than fibula. Then we have patella. Patella is found in that hinge joint. It makes this hinge joint very special in a way than any other joint, because the patella prevents overstretching of the limb. Prevents overstretching. That's why you cannot have your leg. Let me just use a sketch here. That point, that's the lower limb. Then maybe this is the front part, ventral side. Then you want to bend it this side. It's not possible because we have the patella. It prevents overstretching. It's at that point. But the only possible movement is that direction and this direction, but not this direction because of the patella. So there's that bone that is able to move. Even at your own time you can touch, or even right now, when you relax your leg and then you touch, that bone is actually moving inside. The role is just to prevent overstretching. But at the same time, patella allows movement in all other angles. The leg can move in this direction, sideways, because of the patella. Then down we have the tarsals. Tarsals. Tarsals, here there are several bones, about 8 bones, and they form the heel. They form the heel. And then down we have the metatarsals. The metatarsals, about 7 bones in number. This one form the foot. So you can see that metatarsals are also many, just to increase surface area for formation of the foot muscles. Again, they are able to move. Your ankle or your heel is able to move due to the tarsals. The other parts, we have caudal here and a caudal there. So the caudal that is found at the anterior side is called the pectoral caudal. Pectoral caudal. Pectoral caudal is made up of 2 main bones. We have the scapula. Scapula. Scapula is almost triangular in shape. As it approaches the body, it reduces in surface area, and then at that point, but here there is a cavity. That cavity is called clinoid cavity. So it's almost triangular in shape, and it has a cavity at that point, glenoid cavity. And then you can see it has a very large surface area. The reason it has a large surface area is to increase the area for attachment of muscles that moves the arm. So it provides site for attachment of muscles that moves the arm. But there is this cavity that we should talk about. This cavity usually forms a joint with humerus. So the head of humerus will articulate at that point, that way. And then it will form a joint. That joint is called ball and socket. Why is it called ball and socket joint? Because we have a cavity from the scapula, it's forming the socket, that cavity. And then we have the ball of the head of humerus fitting into that cavity. So it takes the two words, ball and socket joint, the upper arm or the shoulder, also called shoulder joint. But just above that, we also have the collarbone stretching all the way at that point. Also called clavicle bone. The role of clavicle bone, it holds the scapula in position, because remember, it is usually large in size with a very high surface area, so it is the one that will be holding that scapula in position. We have some attachment there, the ligaments. The ligaments are those tissues that hold one bone to another. So in essence, the role of pectoral girdle is simply to provide a site for attachment of muscles that move the arm. So you're going to have those muscles here, but they'll be attached from the back side and on front side to the clavicle. Provide site for attachment of muscles, and specific muscles, the muscles that move the arm. Then another girdle at the posterior end of the vertebral column is pelvic. Pelvic girdle. Pelvic girdle is made up of two pubic bones. But these bones are fused together. There are two, but they are fused ventrally. They are fused ventrally to form a joint called pubic symphysis. Pubic symphysis. Maybe to illustrate that, we can just use a diagram or an illustration to show that. So I'll pick it from there. So we have the larger part called the ilium of the pubis or pubic. It has a cavity. You're going to find out the name. And then the anterior part, that way, that's one bone. Then it's fused to another bone of similar structure. With the hole there, obtrata foramen. So we have two bones. The two bones are called pubic bones. There are 2. But each bone is made up of 3 bones that are fused together. So the first part of the bone is called ilium. So the spelling of ilium here is different from that one of small intestines. This is small 1L, but for small intestines, it's capital. It's supposed to be a double L, that is double L. Then ilium for small intestines is written that way. And then the other bone is the pubis. The other bone is called the ischium. So I'm saying we have 2 bones, pubic bones, but each bone is made up of 3 bones. We have the ilium, the pubis, and the ischium. This ischium has some holes inside them called obturata. Obturata. Foramen. And then there's a cavity here. Let me remove this. There is a cavity here called acetabulum. Acetabulum. So I want to look at each part. The ilium here will be forming the site for attachment of muscles of hind limbs. And indeed, you can look at it. It is usually having a large surface area. In this pubis, we have a cavity. That cavity is called acetabulum. The cavity acetabulum forms a socket for attachment or for articulation with the head of femur. So when the head of the femur gets into that cavity, it forms a joint. That's the head, and that is a cavity. Cavity acetabulum. Acetabulum. So it is going to form a joint called ball and socket. The ball coming from the head and the socket coming from the cavity of the pubis. Then ischium. Ischium, I've said, it has 2 holes there. Obturata foramen. They are very large holes inside that pelvic girdle. The reason is to reduce the weight. Reduces the weight of the girdle. Reduces the weight of the girdle. And then there is that joint between these 2 bones. We have already said that joint is called pubis symphysis. These are very important joints, especially in female during pregnancy. That pubis symphysis will have to expand or relax to allow the baby to be born, but is under the influence of a hormone called relaxin. So when a woman gets into labor pains, relaxin hormone will be released. It will cause the pubis symphysis, that joint, to relax a little bit so that now the vaginal canal can increase to allow the baby to be born. So I think those are the major areas of the appendicular skeleton. Now, we said that we cannot talk about skeletal system without looking at other parts. We have axial, we have appendicular skeleton, but we also have joints. Joints. So our question today, as we look at that part, or at the joints, will be, what's the meaning of the word a joint? So when you talk of a joint, is the point of articulation between two bones. Between two bones. But remember, if we have a bone, if this is a bone, and then this is another bone, we have already described the nature of bone tissue. It is tough and hard. If these two bones come together directly, there'll be a problem. So what happens? The end of these bones are covered by a slightly flexible tissue. That tissue is cartilage. So it has a cartilage. The role of cartilage is to reduce friction, but at the same time, suppose these two bones can come in contact. They usually sometime will come in contact, like the bones of the vertebral column. They can come in contact, they are in contact, but these are cartilage. There will be no friction due to presence of cartilage, and also it absorbs the shocks. If there is a mechanical problem such that the two bones are forced to get into contact with each other, the cartilage is going to absorb the shocks. And then we have also said that it reduces friction, We have different types of joints. We are going to look at them. But the two bones are usually held together by another tissue. That tissue is called ligament. Ligament. So the role of ligament is to hold bone to bone, joins bone to another bone. Sometimes when there's a fracture, it's the ligament that has been interfered with. Maybe there was a lot of dislocation, such that one bone moved this direction, the other bone moved the other direction, causing a problem, maybe cutting off of the ligament. But it can be healed with time when the bones are, or when the joint is not allowed to move frequently. So types of joints include, we have three types. Fixed joints. Fixed joints. Fixed joints are immovable joints. Here there is no movement unless it is forced. Very good example is when we are looking at the skull. We say that the skull is made up of cranium. And the cranium is made up of plates of bones. So those bones are usually fused together. There will be one bone there, another bone at that point. Maybe something like that. So 1, 2, 3, 4 bones. But there's a joint here at that point. So that kind of a joint, we were able to give it a name. We call it sutures. It is an example of an immovable joint or a fixed joint. It can only move maybe during surgery. If you want to reach the brains, you are doing brain surgery, you will be able to remove the upper part or the flesh, reach these bones, and then maybe using some way or chemicals, you just pick one of the plate and reach the brains. The other type of the joints, we have synovial joints. Synovial joints. Now for synovial joints, if that's the bone and another bone like that, remember that is cartilage to reduce friction. We shall have a membrane covering that part, a double membrane. That double membrane is called synovial membrane. Synovial membranes. These synovial membranes usually secrete a fluid called synovial fluid. So inside here we shall have synovial fluids. The role of synovial fluid, just like the cartilage and other roles, will include cushioning, acting as a cushion, cushioning bones against mechanical damage. In other words, they are absorbing shock. Absorb shock. That's why you can jump. We are going to look at the points. We have two types of synovial joints. You can jump up and down, but the joints in your knee, the knee joint, you're not going to feel any pain. Another role, reduces friction. Reduces friction between the two bones. And then another role of synovial fluid, it contains nutrients. So those nutrients is for purpose of nourishing bone and cartilage cells. So that is why it is called a synovial joint, because the majority of the features is synovial membrane, synovial fluid. But remember, the two bones are held in position together by a ligament. Types of synovial joints are two. Synovial joints, we have two types. One is called hinge joint. Just like the hinge of the toe, of the hinge of the doors. That's why it's called the hinge joint. An example, e.g., we have the elbow joint. And then we have the knee joint. So one characteristic of hinge joint, as we have already said, it has synovial fluids, which we have given the characteristics or the roles of the synovial fluids. And then the movement. This joint move in 180 degrees Celsius or through 180 degrees Celsius. Just like the elbow. Elbow can only move through 180. That's 180, and then it moves that direction through 180 degrees Celsius. The same to the knee. The lower limb can only move in that direction. So if this is the limb, that is the humerus or femur, that is the tibia and fibula, it can only move that direction and back. It can't go beyond that. And we said for the lower limb, it has the patella. And then another synovial joint is what we have been referring to, ball and socket joint. Ball and socket joint include, example, the shoulder joint. Shoulder joint. In shoulder joint, we are able to find out that we have the scapula, which has a cavity called glenoid cavity. Glenoid cavity articulates with head of humerus, and then it will form the shoulder joint. Another example is the hip joint. Hip joint, we have said we have a cavity in the pelvic girdle called acetabulum. Acetabulum. Acetabulum, as the cavity, we have the head of femur. Head of femur articulating with the acetabulum, forming ball and socket joint. But one major feature of ball and socket joint is that it allows movement in all direction, nearly 360 degrees. Your hand, you can rotate your hand in all direction. Nearly, we have said nearly. Even this one is about 180. Another type of joint is called gliding. Gliding joint. Gliding joint, it means the bones slide over each other. We can get several examples from the body between vertebra. If this is one vertebra and another vertebra of the vertebral column, the backbone, there is no great movement. There's slight movement. Slight movement. But this slight movement are due to what we have already mentioned, the cartilage. There is a cartilage in between to allow slight movement of these bones. We have other areas like the carpals of the wrist. Carpals of the wrist also has a gliding joint, this sliding movement. Also in the ankle, we have the tarsals. You can be able to move your ankle due to the gliding joint. Then the last part of skeletal system are muscles. Muscles. So muscles are mainly made up of tissue, and this tissue is a contractile tissue, made up of contractile tissue. But it has protein substances, two of them, that brings about contraction and relaxation, called myosin and actin. So the role of muscles in the skeletal system, they contract and relax so that movement and locomotion can happen, to bring about movement and locomotion. This is true, for example, if some of the muscles on your body are interfered with, or you are just left a skeleton, assume that all the muscles are not on your skeletal system. There will be a problem in movement because contraction and relaxation will not be there to bring about the framework to change position. Types of muscles. We have three types. We have skeletal muscles. skeletal muscles. Skeletal muscles are usually found attached to the skeleton. That's why they are called skeletal muscles. Found attached to skeleton. But because we have already said muscle is made up of tissue, therefore these tissues must be made up of cells. Usually made up of cylindrically shaped cells. Shaped cells. You can use a diagram just to show how it looks like. So that's a magnified part of the skeletal muscle cell, but it has some crossings or called striations. So these are called striations, and it is made up of many nucleus or nuclei. But each of these cells is made up of several fibers called myofibrils. So it is these myofibrils that contain the protein substances, myosin and actin. So it is these myofibrils that brings about contraction and relaxation. But the striation usually spreads the wave of contraction throughout the skeletal cells, skeletal muscle cells. So in essence, we can be able to give properties of striation of skeletal muscle cells just from this diagram. One of the very important one is that it is multinucleated. Multinucleated. And then it has transverse striations. And then where it is located, we have already said, it's found located or covering the skeleton. And it is made up of myofibrils. These myofibrils, we have said, it consists of myosin and actin. The other type is smooth muscle. Smooth muscle. Smooth muscle, remember, is made up of a tissue, but individual cells are usually spindle-shaped cells with each of that cell. This is a cell that's spindle-shaped, that is spindle-shaped. Each of that cell is made up of one nucleus. So this one is uninucleated, meaning it has, each of those cells has only one nucleus. It has no striation like we have identified in the skeletal muscle. But where is it found? This one is found in tubular structures. Found in the tubular structures of the body. Examples of tubular structures, as we have already seen, we have digestive system. We said digestive system is a continuous tube from the mouth to the anus. We have blood vessels. Blood vessels also consist of tubes. Urinary system. Urinary system also has tubes. But if you look at it, for example, in skeletal muscles, for you to move, it is a conscious effort. You can decide to sit, you can decide to jump, you can decide to walk. It means it is for skeletal muscles, they are usually innervated or controlled by voluntary nervous system. But for smooth muscles, they are controlled by involuntary nervous system. Smooth muscles are controlled by involuntary nervous system. In other words, for example, in the digestive system, for food to move down the digestive tract, we identified a process. I know you can remember the process was called peristalsis. Once you start swallowing food going down, you cannot now decide that I think I'm swallowing this food and I'm not satisfied. Maybe it's not good. Let it come back. It is not possible. Once you start swallowing, it is an action or a process that you have no control over. That's why we are saying involuntary. It's not by your will. It is something that is in the nervous system. So those are some of the areas where we expect smooth muscle. And the last part is cardiac muscle. The last type of muscle is cardiac muscle. So it's also made up of cells called cardiac cells. Cardiac cells. But is found mainly, not any other organ has this type of muscle, the heart. The muscle is made up of some cylindrically shaped cells forming fibers, but those fibers are connected to each other through bridges. Also with striations, some crossings. So this is the cardiac cell. And this cell is made up of one nucleus. But together they become many, multinucleated. So they are also cylindrical in shape, but with a lot of transverse crosses or crossings. We are calling them striations. And then each of that fiber, this is one fiber, another fiber, another fiber, they are connected to each other by a bridge. So the reason why it is highly connected is to spread waves of contraction of the heart muscle. Remember, the role of the heart is to contract and relax so that it can pump blood. For that to happen, the rest of the heart must be involved. So if it began at that point, we are going to have the cross striation spreading the wave of contraction to the rest of this tissue or the rest of that muscle. So we have to remember that it is also controlled by involuntary nervous system. But it is slightly different from that one of the smooth muscle, because the nervous stimulation originates from the heart muscle itself. So because it originates from the heart muscle itself, it is called myogenic. Stimulation is myogenic within the heart muscle itself. That's why if you pick a heart from just an animal that has been killed some few minutes ago, you realize that the heart muscle you will see the contraction and relaxation, because it does not need to contract and relaxation from a stimulation from somewhere else, but it is within the heart muscle itself. So from what you have learned, you can look at the following question. One of them, compare skeletal, smooth, and cardiac muscles. We shall use a table to compare that. Shall have a factor. What we are looking at, we have skeletal, smooth, and cardiac muscle. One of the factors is location. You can look at it. Where do you expect to find skeletal, smooth, cardiac muscle? I think we have gone through it. It was very clear. Location. Where can you find skeletal muscle? Skeletal muscle, we said, is found attached to skeleton. Found attached to skeleton. Smooth muscle, we said, it's found in tubular structures. We mentioned some of those structures: digestive system, urinary system, blood vessels. Cardiac muscle, we have said, is found in the heart. Then two, we can also look at nucleus. Skeletal muscles, we were able to find out that it is made up of many nucleus. So it is multi-nucleated. But for smooth muscle cells, they are uni-nucleated, one nucleus per cell. Heart muscle is multi-nucleated. The cardiac, multi-nucleated. We can also look at the crossings that spread waves of contraction, the striations. We were able to realize that in skeletal muscles, they have these striations present. Smooth muscle, absent. Not there, but for cardiac, they are present. We were able to give reason for the crossings. They spread waves of contraction through the structure. Then we can look at the fibrils. Fibrils in skeleton are present, in smooth muscles are absent, in cardiac muscles are absent. So those are the major features that you can look at, but we have several other features that you can look at, even the number of mitochondria. Mitochondria in skeletal, smooth, and cardiac muscles, they will be there, but not in the same intensity. Like in cardiac muscles, we expect more mitochondria because it is always working. It never stops. Skeletal muscles, when you are resting, they are resting also. Smooth muscles, they could be working, but at a less intensity. So we have several questions, but we can look at this and then find more other questions. If you have questions, you always know how to contact us. Thank you.